Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ariana Jasmine and today we're going to be reacting to a peers debate again. Honestly, it sounds like a Nightmare Blunt rotation, but we're here to react to it. So make sure you like, comment, and share, and let's get into it.
Israel has threatened a severe response to Hezbollah's rocket attack on a children's playing field in the Golan Heights. 12 children aged between 10 and 16 were killed. This was an attack on Israeli-occupied territory, but the community targeted are Druze Arabs. And the scale of the horror now threatens to tip the region into a second all-out war. Can Israel fight a war against Hezbollah as it continues to pound Hamas in Gaza? Are the repeated attacks by its proxies drawing Israel ever closer to a massive war with Iran? Well, welcome to all of you. Let me start, if I may, with you.
Okay, it seems like Piers is progressing. We have an equal panel. It's not one Palestinian against 3 Zionists, 2 Palestinians, and 2 mega freak Zionists. Okay. I wasn't expecting that. There you go.
Rabbi Fleischer, your response, first of all, to this appalling attack which killed so many Israeli children?
Well, they are Israeli children. They're also Druze, part of our minority that lives in Israel. I deal with Druze all the time, and I speak to them. They're an Arabic-speaking minority, non-Muslim, and they are angry. They're very angry, of course, at Hezbollah for striking against.
First of all, why don't you have somebody from their community speak? Why the fuck am I looking at you speaking? Number 2, I don't trust anything this man says. So if he tells me anecdotally that he went and he spoke to the kids in that area or the people in that area, I don't fucking trust him. I'm not saying they're not mad. I'm just saying I don't trust this guy.
Against them, but they're also angry at Israel for not doing more to defend them. And they're saying, you know, with one bombing that happened in Tel Aviv, you guys did an airstrike in Yemen. But now that 12 children have been murdered inside of Israel, in our village, you haven't done enough to flatten the bad guys, to get rid of Hezbollah.
So let's do a little history on Golan Heights. Obviously, they don't just stop land grabbing at, Palestine. They are planning on, taking over most of the Middle East. But this area, if you can see, it's actually outside of Israel. It's a portion of Syria. You could say it's occupied Israeli territory, or you could just say it's fucking Syria because it is Syria. So I think he's also being kind of bad faith when he says Israeli territory because, first of all, it's Syrian. Second of all, it's occupied. So let's just get that straight.
And so I call on Israeli leaders to act with equal measure, to strike back strong against Hezbollah, protect our Israeli citizens, if they be Jews or Druze. That's what we have to do. We have to push back hard. And whenever I speak to Druze, they're always saying to me, you guys are not strong enough against the jihad. You have to be strong against the jihad. And they know they're Middle Eastern people who have lived in Muslim areas throughout their history, and they know that you got to be strong against these guys and push them back. So if we don't push them back, we're going to see more attacks.
How much you want to bet? No fucking Druze said that. How much you want to bet?
Like that, and Israel simply has to be strong and destroy and disarm the enemy to the north. That's the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militia.
But does that mean that there is a preparation going on for an all-out war with Hezbollah? Because if that is the case, the Middle East really is going to go up in flames, isn't it?
Well, Pierce, what are you going to do?
Well, Piers, what are you going to do? I don't know. Maybe just don't bomb the shit out of the Middle East, you fucking weirdo. Why do they act like they have no other choice? Their only choice is to bomb the shit out of people, make them aggravated, and then when they get bombed back, they play victim. Like, stop escalating shit. You've been bombing the border of Lebanon for 9 months now. You have been repetitively bombing the border of Lebanon. The border of Lebanon is pretty much fucking wiped. Like, it looks like a dead zone. So when we're talking about, oh, Israel is attacking Gaza, yeah, they're attacking Gaza, but they're simultaneously attacking Lebanon on a daily basis. It's not a debate. That is a fact. So when Hezbollah strikes back in a territory that you illegally occupied, you want to be mad about it. Maybe stop fucking attacking people.
The enemy now has 150,000 rockets trained against us. They could, estimates show that they could shoot 5,000 rockets a day at Israel. They have 20,000 regular troops, up to 50,000 reservists. And it's a very serious gun that has been pulled and cocked against our head. So, of course, we're going to have a war at some point to get rid of that threat. There's no other way around it.
Omar Badr, this was an appalling incident, wasn't it?
Of course, it was appalling. It's unspeakable. Although I expected it to take a little bit longer before Rabbi Fleischer started lying. Let's be clear about a few facts. First of all, we don't know who's responsible for this rocket attack. Hezbollah has not disavowed any of the literally thousands of attacks that they have launched. This one in particular, they instantly said that it has nothing to do with them because they have neither the political incentive nor a military incentive to target an Arab Druze town in the occupied Golan Heights.
That's true. Why would they hit a majority Muslim occupied area with Arabs in it? Like, what would they benefit from that? It just doesn't sound very like it would give them much of anything.
And it's quite frankly, at this point, between their denial and the fact that there is no independent investigation, it's not really clear who's responsible for this. But more importantly, and contrary to what Rabbi Fleischer just claimed, the families of the victims want nothing to do with further war. They have refused to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu. They have refused to allow Israeli politicians to attend their kids' funerals. You can see video of them yelling at them to leave. And there was just a piece in Israel's leading newspaper today, Haaretz, talking about how the majority of the Jewish community don't want the blood of their children to be used to essentially fulfill further bloodshed and the agenda of this fanatical Israeli government that is using this tragedy in order to promote more war. And the last thing I'll say, Piers, that I think is really, really important. If this incident were to take place 1,000 times over, it still would not come close to the death toll in children that Israel has inflicted in Gaza over the past 9 months. So anybody who's actually serious and sincerely concerned about the killing of children and violence should be insisting on an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the handing of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the people around him to The Hague for the war crimes they have committed against tens of thousands of innocent civilians over the past several months.
Okay, before I go to Emily, if it wasn't Hezbollah, who was it?
Look, there's many possibilities, right? It could be potentially an errant Hezbollah rocket. It could be another group that launched it, or it could be a potential misfire of an Iron Dome missile or something. We're not really sure. The one thing that we do know, Piers, is that the Israeli...
That has happened. But you know what? It's true. The Druze people have never accepted Israeli government. They've also been occupied by Israeli government. So I'm not sure why they would be like, oh yeah, we're in support of the Israeli government. We just wish they had better protection. Like, no, the Druze people are occupied people. They don't want anything to do with the Israeli government, period.
The Israeli government lies through its teeth time and time again. They lied about who's responsible for the killing of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. They lied about 40 beheaded babies on October 7th. They're just a machine of lies. And so you have to get an independent investigation.
This girl, Emily, I can't stand her.
To actually look into this and sort it all out. But even if it does turn out to be a Hezbollah rocket, if that is indeed what the evidence points to, it's almost certainly an accident because there is no incentive for that target to actually take place. And we should be looking to de-escalate tensions, not rising them up. That's how you actually save the future of the region and pull us back from the brink of war. You work towards de-escalation, and you certainly don't allow this warmongering Israeli government to continue with this plan to wreak havoc throughout the entire region to achieve a level of dominance that it no longer has, and it's desperate to hold on to.
All right, Emily Schroeder, your response.
I mean, I think it's highly ironic that he has the audacity to come on your show and talk about how Israel is targeting children when we're looking at what Hezbollah has done. Hezbollah leaders such as Samir Kuntar, who literally murdered an Israeli child face-to-face with the butt of his rifle. Hezbollah, who in previous wars murdered 50% of the civilians who were killed, were actually Arab Israeli citizens. There were rockets coming down onto majority Arab towns like Nazareth, killing Arab Israeli babies. There has been no differentiation by terrorist organizations when it comes to targeting Israeli citizens, whether they're Druze or Arab, Christian, Jewish, doesn't matter. If you're Israeli, that's fair game for terrorist organizations. And that is a policy they've had for many, many, many years. There is no reason to believe that suddenly Hezbollah.
Yeah, I don't know what an Arab Israeli is. I mean, first of all, let's just get that out of the way. Like, they hit predominantly Arab Israelis. Okay, babes, like, pipe it down. We don't even know what the fuck that is or what that means, because you're either Israeli or you're Arab or you're forced to be an Arab that lives under Israeli occupation. So But also, going beyond that fact, I think we can do this what about Hezbollah, what about the IDF, what about Hezbollah, like we can do this whataboutism game all we want. We could do it all day, right? We could point fingers at each other all day. But at the end of the day, which military has killed more civilians? Which military has killed more children? Which military indiscriminately bombs the shit out of a besieged area, Gaza Strip, right? Which military is accused and actually been found guilty of actively R-wording prisoners? Which military is known for having a camp that actually puts prisoners in torture camps and stuff like that? You know, we can point the finger all we want, but the military that has done some of the most egregious shit is the IDF. So I don't really think Emily has any ground to stand here because the call is coming from inside the house, babes. Like, talk about the military that you support before you try to fucking talk about any other military. And I'm not, just to be clear, I'm not a supporter of any military. I'm not a supporter of any government. I don't like governments. I don't like military. I don't like any group that is governing anything whatsoever. Okay, that's not me. But if you want to compare shit, like, you have nothing to stand on, to be completely honest. An Arab Israeli is a Palestinian who has an Israeli passport. Yeah, of course, yeah. So an Arab that has to live in Israel under occupation.
That wouldn't be targeting children. It's patently absurd.
These kids were not Israeli.
It's patently absurd. And also what he's saying, about the Jewish communities, the majority, stop interrupting me. The majority of Druze fight side by side. They fight side by side in the IDF. They fight side by side. I know what you're going to say. It's nonsense, and I'll tell you why. Because the Druze in Majda Shams were all offered citizenship, and they are eligible for citizenship anytime they want to take it, whether or not they were.
Yeah, they're offered citizenship because you guys took their land. I don't get that point either.
Citizens, they are eligible for it, and they are entitled to Israeli citizens. Some of them were Israeli citizens. I do not know that 100% of them. I do not know if 100%. Let me speak.
Stop lying about who these children are. They're not
you have been
Israeli.
lying the entire time. You came on here and tried to say that Hezbollah.
Please don't talk over each other.
Hezbollah has no incentive.
Yeah, Omar, with respect, Emily let you speak. Hang on. Emily, you can speak. Omar, I did let Omar. You did speak without it. Omar, you spoke without interruption. Let Emily respond, and I will then come back to you. But let her respond.
Sounds good. Go for it.
Israeli citizens in the Golan Heights are entitled to Israeli citizenship. They have been offered, and many of them have accepted. The numbers are actually going up over time. In addition to that, I, as a journalist, have spoken to people in Majda Shams, since this started. They are very, very clear about what they want. And frankly, Yishai is correct. The Druze community doesn't put up with terrorist behavior, such as what Hezbollah did. And the idea that Hezbollah doesn't have an incentive to target Israel.
Why do you have two people who are not Druze speaking for the Druze people? Number one. Number two, the rabbi and Emily. Each example that they've brought up is anecdotal. I have spoken to these people and they've told me X, Y, and Z. First of all, you're a spokesperson. Second of all, why should I believe you? Third of all, you're not a fucking journalist. I know you like to call yourself that. You're not. Fourth of all, bring on a Druze person that is speaking for their people, that was chosen by their people to speak for them, and let me see what they say. And if they parrot everything that you're telling me, okay, I'll pipe it down. But when you have two people who are very clearly settlers, it's one of those things where it's like, you guys are speaking for an ethnic minority that is actively getting settled by your government that you support and you speak for. Why do you think anyone's gonna believe you? Why do you think anyone's gonna listen to you, period?
Israeli children, whether Arab or Jewish, is absurd because since their existence, since they were founded, this is a policy that they have had. They have targeted civilians. That is why they're a terrorist organization. And I want to remind everyone of one more thing, that this terrorist organization is a direct proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. They're acting at the direction and at the behest of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the rocket which was fired, according to Israeli sources and according to the IDF itself, was an Iranian-made rocket. So the Iran fingerprints from the Islamic Republic are all over this, the same as they are with every terrorist organization that Israel is dealing with now. And I agree with Yishai that we need to deliver a very, very strong deterrent, not punishment. This isn't about revenge. This is about deterring Hezbollah from attacking Israeli citizens. And they have sent over 6,000 rockets since October.
You either attack back or you don't. What is a deterrent? What does she even mean by that?
October 8th. To act as if Israel is warmongering here is patently absurd.
All right. May I respond to this avalanche of lies at this point?
Let me just let Omar, hang on, please. Omar, you respond to what Emily just said, then I'm going to go to Rabbi Fleischer.
Sure. Two things. First of all, she said these were Israeli children, and we could see when the Israeli military spokesperson was addressing this incident that he was interrupted by other Israeli officials to point out that they're not, in fact, Israeli. The Golan Heights are occupied Syrian territory, and a significant portion of the Syrian Druze community that lives in them refused Israeli citizenship, which tells you something. And the other thing about what these children and their families want.
Omar, do we actually, Omar, do we know how many of the children who died were Israeli citizens?
I'm not entirely sure if any of them were or not, but I can tell you there is one thing that is really clear at this point, Piers, that I think is really important, is you can listen to Emily and Rabbi Fleischer tell you about what the families of these kids want, or you can listen to the families themselves, who are widely quoted in the Israeli press, talking at this point about the fact that they don't want the blood of their children to be used as justification for further bloodshed. And they have referred to Netanyahu as a war criminal, and they want nothing to do with this government. So yes, you can listen to these propagandists tell you what their interpretation of these events are, or you can talk directly to the families of these children who were killed with this really incredibly tragic and horrifying incident and find out what they actually want. And it has nothing to do with the lies that we've just heard from Ishai and from Emily.
So
Okay,
Rabbi
Fleischer. I mean,
family, so there's not a consensus on that.
Emily,
there's not a consensus at all.
Emily, let me go to Rabbi Fleischer, please. Rabbi Fleischer, I mean, it's complex, this particular story, for the reasons that we are now, discussing in this debate. Is that we don't actually know how many, if any, of these children were Israeli school children. I assumed that most of them were. That appears not to be the case. Do you have any information which can say unequivocally either way?
I'm a little bit at wonderment at your question, as though it matters. These guys they're citizens or residents of Israel. What does it matter? They were shot at by Hezbollah, which shoots into Israel. So we have all kinds of folks, minorities.
No, it really matters, because then it creates the narrative of whether they're actually happy being under your territory and your occupation or not. If all 12 of those children, their parents declined Israeli citizenship, that tells you everything you need to know. It tells you that they don't accept the Israeli government. It's a huge part of the fucking conversation.
Living in our land, all kinds. If they were Arab, that would be okay. They killed 12 kids because they're trying to shoot at Israel, one way or the other. So that's what this is about. What exactly the identity of the kids were, is that really important, Piers? I don't quite understand the question.
No, I think it doesn't change the fact these children are being killed.
I work with Druze every single day. I always ask them, I say to them, tell me candidly, what do you think about living in Israel? They're like, great country, but you guys are weak. You guys are weak vis-a-vis the jihad. I hear.
Yes, the Jews tell them that. The Jews tell them that they love Israel is a great country, but the military is weak. You know what? If you genuinely believe that, that's natural selection. And at that point, there's no saving you. There's no saving you at that point.
I hear that every day. I work with them. They're in the army in Hebron. I deal with them. They're in the civil administration. And I always say to them candidly, tell me. They're like, you guys are too weak. So what does it matter what exactly the status of these kids are? The kids should not be murdered by folks who, what they do is arm themselves with 150,000 rockets, Iranian paid, ready to shoot at Israel. It happened to have hit some Druze kids. Tomorrow will be Jewish kids. What's the difference?
Okay, well, let me turn to Palestinian kids who were killed. 30 people, including women and children, were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a school in central Gaza on Saturday. Over 130 odd injured, I think. What is your response to that, Rabbi Fleischer?
This is the tragedy of war, and this is exactly Hamas's strategy for this war. They and their fighters will live in tunnels underneath Gaza. They will fire rockets into Israel. They will send in their terrorists to kill, maim, and murder. Then they'll keep the civilians on top while they live in their tunnel hotels underneath, and make sure that there's more dead babies, so that they could use that in the media as a strategy as another way of striking.
You know what I'm shocked at is the fact that after 10 months of this war, everyone has dispelled this propaganda point that they're using children as human shields, and they're still using it as a talking point. Like, you guys couldn't come up with anything better? It's still the same talking point from 9 months ago that literally everyone's debunked. Y'all get so much money from different countries for your PR, for your military, for all these different things, and human shields is the best thing you can come up with after 9 months. That's wild. And the fact that he said that with a straight face, he said, well, don't put the babies and the children in the streets. Like, if anyone genuinely sits here and says, you know what, this guy is right, you're a fucking moron. You're a moron. That's what you are.
Striking at Israel. So it's horrific.
But how
It's
many
horrible.
terrorists were
promise-
killed? Okay, but hang on. How many terrorists were killed in that airstrike?
Pierce, it's a war. I'm not here. I'm not an army spokesman. I'm not here to tell you exactly numbers. You're kind of getting today into these,
but if Hezbollah? Okay, but here's my point. If Hezbollah,
I promise you, Pierce, nobody was targeting these children.
Let me make my position. If Hezbollah suddenly said, yeah, we fired that rocket which killed the 12 children, right? The 12 children who were killed after this attack in Gaza. Yes, we fired that rocket. It's war. That's what war involves. You would be incandescent with rage that the lives of so many innocent children had been destroyed, and Hezbollah's response was simply, this is war. What is the difference ideologically if they were to take that position to what Israel and you've just said about the killing of so many innocent people in Gaza?
I think that's a very fair question, but I think that the answer is obvious. Israel is an ethnic minority in our region trying to survive. We are now.
They try to make it seem like they're this poor little country that's surrounded. First of all, you fucking picked that land. You picked Palestine. So why are you bitching and moaning when you're the one who specifically picked to occupy that land? You could have gone to fucking, I don't know, Antarctica or the North Pole, where you would have been surrounded by no one. But no, you picked Palestine. Number one, if you were going to be so scared of being the ethnic minority, why the fuck did you choose that place? And also, second of all, they try to make it seem like they're this, little small government, this little small country that constantly gets attacked. They are economically tied to America, which is a global superpower. They get money, loads of money from America every single year. They have America's unequivocal support. Literally, whatever they want to do, America's like, yeah, but go do it. Go do it. Have at it. So this whole entire argument of like, we're a small little ethnic minority. Go fuck yourself. Go fuck it. No, that's not the situation at all. And you know what's crazy? This is the second time Pierce has tried to ask him a question that actually challenges his beliefs, and he's like, Pierce, you're getting into the details. You're getting really into the detail. Like, yeah, you're a spokesperson. Your job is to answer the details because you're a fucking spokesperson.
Now surrounded by a proxy noose around us. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and probably more through from Iraq. And these are all Iranian tentacles. It's a noose that's tightening around us. We're fighting for our survival. And the enemies are shooting into Israel to try to destroy us and try to goad us into killing more of their kids because that's part of their strategy. When they do it, they're trying to destroy Israel. When we do it, God forbid, when we try not to, we're trying to defend ourselves and to defend our ethnic minority in the region. So we're fighting a defensive war. They're fighting an offensive war of destruction. That's the difference.
But when you say that you're fighting a defensive
Pierce, if I may.
Hang on, Emily, hang on. I will come to you next. When you say you're fighting a defensive war, what the critics of the way that Israel has executed this war will say is that, yes, what happened October 7th was horrific. 1,200 people murdered, including many, many innocent women and children. Nearly 7,000 more wounded, some of them horrifically. Yes, that was a despicable terror attack. But the scale of Israel's response in Gaza alone has been unbelievably disproportionate. That you're now up to 35,000, 40,000 people being killed. Again, on Saturday, not really reported that much because it becomes the norm that 30 people are killed by an Israeli airstrike, 100 plus more injured, many, many women and children killed and wounded. And this is going on an almost daily basis. And there seems to be no apparent plan by Israel's government for what happens at the end of this, or indeed how it ends.
Pierce, let me use this opportunity then to actually criticize my government as well. I think that Israel should have fought this war much harder right at the beginning. In the first 2 weeks, we should have shut down the electricity and the water and the fuel, and we should have dried out the terrorists. We should have turned off all those turbines that bring air into those tunnels. We should have fought a very hard and fast war instead of a drawn-out 10-month war where we still haven't even destroyed Hamas. And so I'm a critique.
That's actually, like, that's psychotic. That is straight up psychotic. How does he sit here and call Hezbollah terrorists when he is literally saying that they should have just cut the gas, cut the electricity, cut the water, cut the food for an enclave of 2+ million people? That would have killed all of them within a matter of 30 days. That's insane to me. Wow, that's crazy.
A critic of that as well. I say that had Israel fought a much more vociferous and intense war at the get-go, we would have probably defeated Hamas and saved a lot more civilian lives. When you draw it out, when you let the international community send in food, which then gets taken by Hamas for their fighters, and you slow everything down and you make it into a war of attrition, more and more people die. And so I say, be much more aggressive, quick, strong, push back on the bad guys. And I agree with you 1,000%. I couldn't agree even more that Israel does not have an endgame strategy. As I've said on your show previously, people like myself believe that Israel should govern Gaza, re-govern Gaza militarily, and then slowly but surely resettle it. And of course, give decent Arabs, Palestinians who are pro-Israel, who are anti-jihad, which there are millions of them. There are millions that are sadly pro-jihad, but there are millions who are against it and want a decent life with Israel. This is our ancestral land. This is part of the mandate for Israel. And so this is the place that we should govern. I might even be in disagreement with some of my colleagues in Israel, but people like myself believe that we should be bigger, bolder, hold on to that land, and that's the end.
He said we need to resettle that land. We need to give the decent Arabs, we'll let the decent Arabs live. They can, they can drive taxis for us and work in restaurants. We'll let them live. That's wild. And then he said, kill off everybody else. That's basically what he just said. And this girl, this psycho joker looking ass bitch is smirking. This is truly diabolical. Can you imagine what the reaction would be if a Muslim Middle Eastern person came onto Piers and said this about Israel? Can you just imagine? Can you imagine the global outrage that would ensue from that? This is insane, diabolical double standards, and we're seeing it on display right now. That's so gross and disgusting. I don't even know what to say.
Game strategy, which is to govern that place, rid it of jihad, rebuild it, give decent people an opportunity for a decent life. Only Israel can ensure that. Certainly not the Palestinian Authority, certainly not Hamas or some kind of international consortium. It's not going to work. It never worked. And they're just going to rebuild the jihad if you let them. And I say destroy the jihad, govern the place, give decent people an opportunity for a life again in Gaza.
Let me go to the General Secretary of the Palestinian National Initiative Party, Mustafa Barghouti. Mustafa Barghouti, thank you for joining me. Your response to what you just heard from Rabbi Fleischer?
Well, there are several things. I think what was described is nothing but a fascist point of view. You're dealing with fascists in Israel. It's a fascist government, fascist spokesperson, who are advocating not only killing Palestinians, but also cutting off electricity and water and starving people to death. What is this? Even the Nazis.
This man stayed quiet for 20 minutes and just started talking his shit. He was quiet, he didn't say a goddamn thing. And then he just let these motherfuckers talk and say insane shit. And he was just like, well, they're fascists. Oh my God. Wow, that was amazing.
Did not come close to doing that. It's a horrible Holocaust that Israel is conducting in Gaza. And it's not defensive, because no army can claim it is defensive when it is occupying another people and another country. And it cannot call itself defensive when it is committing and conducting a system of apartheid against another people. And speaking about children, 16,800 Palestinian children killed by the Israeli army. That doesn't count. Aren't we equal human beings or not? 50,000 people killed, 72% of them are women and children. More than 90,000 people injured so far, many of whom will die because Israel has destroyed all hospitals all medical facilities, all services. And they speak about defensive war. What kind of defensive war? This is an aggression, a terrible aggression. And the cause of that, I don't want to repeat what we told you on many times on your program. Before the 7th of October, there was ethnic cleansing of Palestinians for 76 years. There was occupation of Palestinian land for 57 years. There was a system of apartheid and oppression. There were 1 million people arrested in the occupied Palestinian territories. And by the way, about the Golan, nobody can prove that this was a rocket thrown by Hezbollah. And Hezbollah asked for an international investigation. Why Israel refuses that? Why Israel refuses to have an international investigation of what happened in the Golan Heights? And the Golan Heights are occupied Syrian territories. And the citizens there are Syrian citizens, not Israeli citizens. They are occupied by force. And they don't want to be Israeli citizens. They're very clear about that. And at the end of the day, let them allow an international investigation committee to check what's going on. I am so worried about the situation, not only because of the injuries and the killing on our people, but also about the fact that now Gaza Strip is totally devastated in the worst kind of man-made humanitarian crisis. More than 1.5 million people are stuck.
See, this is why when you go on a debate panel, if you keep your cool, if you write all of your talking points, if you write all of your notes, and you just stay calm and you let everyone speak, you can clock everyone. Because while all of these people were spewing their horse shit, this man was quiet, he was taking his notes, he was listening. And the minute Piers asked him to speak, he clocked everyone. There's no refuting what he's saying. There's no refuting. Golan Heights is occupied Syrian territory. They don't want to be a part of Israel. This is well known. There is no proof that it was a Hezbollah bomb or a Hezbollah attack. They're using it as a scapegoat to bomb the shit out of Beirut, which is the capital of Lebanon. They're trying to start a war with Lebanon. They have been for 9 months. This was their scapegoat. They've been bombing the shit out of the border of Lebanon as well. But more importantly, these people are not admitting the fact that their military that they support has caused egregious amounts of harm towards Palestinian people. You are not a victim when you actively occupy a group of people. You are not a victim. You are an occupier. That's what you are. That's what you will always be. It's just that simple.
Now in a very little strip with no food, no medicine, no shelter, no place to go to, and the bombardment continues. Just because Netanyahu doesn't want to stop this war, and just because Netanyahu wants to save his guts, and wants to continue this war because he knows that the end of this war means the end of his political career. This is terrible. And I can see that what we see in Israel, unfortunately, is the rise of fascism. And the proof to that is what you have seen yesterday when the Israeli fascists attacked even Israeli soldiers because they wanted to investigate the cases in Sdetiman prison, or concentration camp, I should say, where Palestinian prisoners were tortured to death. They were beaten, they were starved, they were shocked with electrical shocks, they were hanged, and some of them had their hands amputated because of the chains that were put on them, and some of them were raped. Sexual abuse and rape happened in Israeli prison, Sdetiman, by Israeli soldiers. That's not my report, it's the Washington Post report. How could Israel live with that and still claims it is a democracy and claims that it is supporting human rights and that it is...
By the way, abuse and rape has been a tactic to assert your power in these situations for a very long time. You look at Vietnam, you look at the occupation of indigenous people in America, you look at the slave trade that we had to bring African people to America. You look at the occupation of Israel right now, right? Like, we're seeing this tactic of raping in order to assert your power has been a problem for a very fucking long time. And that's why when we look at somewhere like Israel, like, it's egregious, it's disgusting, but it's not surprising because history repeats itself.
Okay, let me go to Emily Schrader. I mean, Emily Schrader, the charge there is that Israel's become a fascist state. And that it's committing torture and rape and other heinous crimes against Palestinians in prison. What is your response to that?
I mean, I think that the reports are horrifying, of course. I know that this is under investigation and that several of the soldiers in question have been arrested and are currently undergoing interrogation. And yes, there have been several incidents of riots outside of Army bases. One of them, I think, was actually they breached into that, and it's disgraceful behavior, and it runs contrary to our laws, which is why there were arrests related to this. And I think, he asked, how can Israel claim that they're a democracy when there are incidents such as what was reported? It remains to be seen if that's verified or not, but for now we'll assume that it is the case. How can that happen in a democracy? And the answer is, when that happens, or if that happens in a democracy, those people are arrested and those people are tried. That is what should happen in a democracy, and I do think that those incidents do need to be investigated. And if you really want to know how democratic Israel is, all you have to know is that today the state of Israel was actually speaking to some of the terrorists who were involved in the October 7th massacre in order to investigate the treatment of Palestinian prisoners. Now, I don't condone certainly everything that's been reported, everything that I've heard. I think it's absolutely horrendous if it does turn out that that is true as reported. However, the fact that we are investigating it alone shows a stark contrast when you look at how people reacted to what happened on October 7th. Hamas tried to claim falsely that rape wasn't something that was condoned. It turns out from the materials that were recovered from the terrorists themselves, including their instructions that were given to them by Hamas, in those instruction booklets, they had religious approval to commit acts of sexual violence against civilians that day, which was committed against both men and women, as we have seen from survivors as well as those who did not survive, reports, as well as from the terrorists themselves who carried them out. Some of them have admitted this during investigations. In addition to that, what we also found on the terrorists was that there was a list of words of how to say certain phrases in Hebrew. A lot of them make sense in order for the terrorist operation that they were carrying out, certain terminology that they needed in order to get around.
Deflecting, whataboutism, that's what it is. That story is a little different. The soldiers were put in prison, trigger warning, the soldiers were put in prison because there was a report that about 10 soldiers were accused of R-wording a Palestinian man so many times to the point where he went into permanent paralysis. So surprisingly, the Israeli military was like, okay, we're going to bring these soldiers in and we're going to investigate this. So when they brought the soldiers in, a bunch of far-right Israeli people started rioting outside. They were like trying to break open the fences of the police station and whatnot. And then later on, it was either later on that same day or the next day, they released all of the soldiers that were accused of doing that to that Palestinian man. And we know for a fact that that Palestinian man is not the only person who was R-worded repeatedly by the Israeli military, because we have loads of proof that this is a usual thing. What these people are doing is they're taking a certain amount of information and they're just deflecting. And at this point, like, you just look fucking dumb. You know what I mean? Because anyone that actually does their research knows that you're not being truthful.
Physically. But something that really stuck out to me when I looked into this is that on that list of words that they learned how to say in Hebrew to their victims was take off your clothes and take off your pants. Now you tell me, why would someone open your legs and take off your clothes? Why would someone need to open their legs in order for any security purpose whatsoever?
Well, I don't think
so we know that rape was a strategy.
Well, I have no doubt that there was sexual abuse, including rape, perpetrated on that day.
Yes, but the response of Hamas is the difference.
Well, okay,
because what we see in response to that isn't that Hamas investigated it. Israel is investigating. Israel's investigating, and those people, if they committed that, should be prosecuted. They should be imprisoned. Hamas doesn't do that. Hamas praises it.
I understand that. But if it turns out that these Israelis, soldiers, have been perpetrating these crimes, it is just as despicable as the sexual abuse and rapes that were committed by the other side. So we should all be able to agree on that. But let me ask you on the wider point.
Yes.
I don't understand how this war ends. Gaza is being completely flattened. The people are being displaced now to places where they're getting continually bombed.
Oh, damn, the other guy left.
We had 30 plus people killed at the weekend in an airstrike on an area they've been told to go to. Where does this end? What does victory look like for Israel? Because right now, it's very, very hard to see what victory is.
I mean, I think that Israel does need to come up with a better strategy. I actually agree with you, Shea Fleischer, on that. I do not agree with him, however, about resettling Gaza. That's something even the prime minister flatly rejected, even in his speech in Congress, and I'm not a supporter of his. So that being said, I don't think that's on the agenda. I think that Israel needs to come up with a plan in order to allow Palestinians to have their own self-determination in that territory at some point. A two-state solution, not something we can even speak about now, unfortunately, because I think far too much of the population rejects the right of Israel to exist in any capacity. But there does need to be a...
Yeah, well, you're also bombing the shit out of them, so I don't really know what... Why? You know, it's the self-victimization for me. I don't think most of the population even wants us to be alive. They don't even believe in our rights to be alive. Like, you're the one bombing the shit out of them and killing them, so I don't really... Are they bombing the shit out of you, or are you bombing the shit out of them? Number one.
A longer-term strategy when it comes to this. I also have to mention that part of the reason this has continued to go on is because Hamas continues to hold those hostages. I mean, if you give back those hostages, you're taking away a lot of incentive. I mean, Hamas has been really demoralized. They've really been destroyed.
How many lies do I have to sit here?
Yeah, so time and time again, Hamas has come forward and said, listen, we will give you back all of your hostages. We just want a ceasefire. And Netanyahu said no. But then, second of all, you're saying give back the hostages, give back the hostages. Y'all just killed Hania. You're saying you want peace, you're saying you want all the hostages back, but you're killing the person you're supposed to speak to. So I don't really understand how that works either at all.
The majority of this organization. But I do think that Israel needs to come up with a better plan for a long-term exit strategy when it comes to dealing with Gaza, and also.
Well, I don't think with respect, I don't think Israel has a plan at all. That's the problem. Let me go to Omar Badar again. You were shaking your head there as you heard what Emily said. Why?
Practically for 20 minutes straight. I mean, look, Rabbi Fleischer's views, I think, are quite honest and transparent. He thinks Israel is not genociding Gaza hard enough and wants them to genocide them harder. Wants a war of conquest where Israel takes over whatever lands it wants that actually don't belong to Israel under international law. So none of it merits a response. I think the fascism in what he has to say is quite blatant for the audience. But when Emily engages in this kind of systematic dishonesty, I do think that it is really worth responding to. One, on the question of the torture of Palestinian prisoners. You have a situation in which every major human rights organization in the world, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, even Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem and others, say that there is systematic torture of Palestinians in Israeli dungeons. And the fact that there is no accountability, and this, for the most part, happens with complete and total impunity. In this case, there happens to be a particularly egregious case of a soldier who was of a Palestinian prisoner who was gang raped by the 9 soldiers. And when there is overwhelming evidence and there are horrific injuries that have emerged from that, there is an effort to arrest these soldiers who are involved in this. And what you end up with is riots, not just riots by random fanatics on the streets like Rabbi Fleischer and his friends and others, but by ministers in the Israeli government, where you have literally a minister sitting in the Knesset talking about how rape of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli dungeons is okay by him. This is stuff that is being said by government ministers. And I'm sorry, when a society has disintegrated into this level, where people who are supposed to represent a country in government are rioting and defending riots in defense of gang rape, you know something is terribly, terribly wrong here. And you have to get to the point to where you actually start engaging with the small but important human rights community that exists within Israel to start talking about what shifts need to happen in order to push Israel in a more moral direction. And as far as what can happen in Gaza with moving forward at this point, the reason we are here is because Israel insists. I mean, look, we can get into a million different details about what happens at this incident and that war, but the fundamental reality is Israel rules over millions of Palestinians. It denies them equal rights. It denies them the right to a state. It steals their land at will. It robs them of their water. It kills their children at will, engages in every single imaginable war crime that you can imagine against this entire people who are subject and held without any freedom or human rights. And as long as we are in that situation, unfortunately, the phrase no justice, no peace is not just some empty slogan. It's not just a protest slogan. It's a description of what human nature is, that in any situation where you have injustice against the people who are being held without rights, that is a recipe for conflict. And if we are, once again, serious about getting out of a situation of perpetual conflict, we have to move towards recognizing Palestinians as equal human beings.
Okay, but Omar, how do you see?
That does not exist.
I understand it, but presumably you don't see any future for Hamas in any kind of government role in Gaza.
Look, in the long term, we have to move towards rejecting all forms of violence. But again, justice is a prerequisite for that. And what the problem that you have right now, Piers, is that you have a fascist, monstrous, genocidal government on one side practicing apartheid for decades, gets to carry out wanton violence. And then we're asking the question of, should Hamas exist or not? Yes, obviously, in an ideal world, Hamas would not exist, but Hamas is a natural product.
They also weren't able to have elections since 2006. So, also the PLO, when the PLO was becoming strong, Israel supported Hamas and funded Hamas and allowed Hamas to grow. So this is partially also Israel's fault too. I don't get it. Let people live the way that they need to live on their land, and maybe you won't end up with an armed military group like Hamas. You know what I mean? It's crazy to think that would be the solution, but guys, people are so fucking stupid.
Of the policies that Israelis impose on Palestinians, that whenever you abuse and humiliate and deny people their freedom for this long, people are going to gravitate towards.
Listen, for the chatter that's saying Hamas was elected and that's not the problem, I implore you to get colonized by a group of people you don't want to get colonized with. I implore you to get your house taken from you, your autonomy taken from you, all the rights you have taken from you. I implore you to live in an area where they control your gas, they control your energy, they control the water and food you get. And I implore you to tell me that after living for decades in that situation, you wouldn't come up with a paramilitary group like Hamas too. I implore you. Because I don't think any fucking American could survive in Gaza for 6 months. I don't think so. You know why? Because I'm an Iranian American that was born and raised in America. I lived in Iran for 1 year. I couldn't handle it. I just could not handle it. I couldn't do it. Physically couldn't do it. Mentally couldn't do it. It was the hardest year I've ever lived in my life. And to this day, I still go to therapy because of the shit I saw that 1 year I lived there. So you're here telling me this, that, and the third when you have never, even for a day, lived in the experiences that they live in on a daily basis. So I don't want to hear anyone tell me jack shit about what the problem is or what isn't. Because if you let people live the way that they need to on the land that they need to, they will make the decisions that they need to make for themselves. And that's just period.
Violence, and that's how groups like Hamas form in the first place. So are we just going to sloganeer about which groups should exist or not exist, or are we interested in solving a problem? And if we are interested in solving it, there is no denying that our complicity in Israel's war of conquest for decades now, stealing land in the West Bank, occupying the Golan Heights, imposing a suffocating siege on the people of Gaza and denying them water and electricity and all of this, that's a recipe for more conflict. And we have to end international support for this regime until that apartheid system falls, and then we can move forward towards a better future. And that is a future in which Hamas would not exist, because people who are calling for violence on the Palestinian side would not find any support, because Palestinians would see that there is a prospect for a better future and justice and human rights.
Rabbi Fleischer, my problem. Hang on, Emily. Hang on. Let me get to Rabbi Fleischer. Rabbi Fleischer, my problem with what you said earlier when I spoke to you was that you basically outlined a situation where what you wished had happened was that very early on, after October the 7th, Israel turned off, I think you said, the water, the power, the food. And then you talked about Israel basically taking over the whole of Gaza at the end of this. That is an occupation. I mean, that is pure evidence, is it not, that Israel is an occupying country.
Okay, listen, I've been watching Piers for a couple of months now, and I think Piers is he's kind of flipping a bit. I think he's kind of starting to see the light a little bit. I don't know, though. He flip-flops a lot, so I'm not sure. I could be wrong.
Because what you're saying is you have the ability to control the on and off switch for Palestinians to have food, to have power, to have water. And at the end of it, you want to just go in and take it over anyway. That is the purest embodiment of an occupation. Both the power levers you have to control whether they eat or have power or whatever, and secondly, your desire for just taking over the entire Gaza Strip at the end of it.
So let me clarify. First thing is, let's remember that when you start wars, then the other side wars back at you. right? They started a horrific war against us. That's what happens. You start with Israel, with the Jewish people. You try to destroy them and injure them. Expect us to fight back with ruthlessness and with seriousness to destroy you back. That's what happens. When you have a society that supports the Hamas, that's what happens. So first thing is, like, remember that wars are not pretty things. If you start a war against, you're an aggressor, accept the idea that the other side is going to push back hard. You can't start a war and then be like, hey, look what you're doing to me. That's what happens when you start a war.
Hang on. Rabbi Fleischer, let me just clarify. I'm not disputing that Israel had an absolute right and duty to defend itself and was obviously going to respond with significant force. I was really pointing out that what you said was they should have turned off the power, the water, the food. It's Israel's ability to do that is part of the problem. That is what an occupying force does. It has that control over food, over water,
we are neighbors with
over
Gaza.
electricity.
We gave away Gaza
and
in 2005.
I don't think there could be. No, but how can there be a future for Palestinians if, out of all this horror, Israel continues to be able to control the ability of Palestinians to eat or have power?
Pierce, please. Let's be clear. Every power in the world controls other minorities. You have a British.
Wait, that was crazy. Wait, this is actually fucking insane. You did not just say that. Oh my God.
Over food, over water.
We are neighbors with
over
Gaza.
Electricity.
We gave away Gaza
and
in 2005.
I don't think there could be. No, but how can there be a future for Palestinians if, out of all this horror, Israel continues to be able to control the ability of Palestinians to eat or have power?
Pierce, please. Let's be clear. Every power in the world controls other minorities.
My guy, you really didn't have to say that out loud. Like, you could have just thought that. You could have just kept it in your mind. I know. Ew, brother, ew. No, this is diabolical. He's honestly, I feel like you know what? I'm not gonna say it. I feel like if he could, he would own slaves. That's the kind of vibe I get from him. I feel like if he could, he would.
You have a British accent at some point. You know, England controlled a lot of the world, but there's all kinds of minorities that live in England to this very day. Every power, if it's the Turks or the Iranians or the Egyptians, and any power in the world has other minorities living inside of it. We have an Arab minority living within the Jewish state. The Jewish area is a tiny area within the Arab majority. There are minorities living in the Middle East, like the Kurds, like the Israelis, who are armed and defend themselves. Now, we have neighbors that have attacked us. We're pushing back on those neighbors. And please be accurate about let's quote me accurately. What I said was, had we fought a more ruthless war from the get-go, it would have been done in 2 weeks. We would have saved countless of civilian lives, because when you draw it out, that's when people die. When you make it fast and furious, which is the Israeli military doctrine, then you save a lot of lives. I wanted to see Israel destroy the terrorists and the tunnel system from the get-go quickly and not kind of be slow about it, thereby saving a lot of civilians. Now, I believe that this is our land from the get-go. Gaza is not Palestinian. It's never been Palestinian. That's a recently created narrative. It was wrestled away from Egypt. We're actually liberated away from Egypt in the 6-Day War. We took control of it. There's minorities living there. Good. They could live under Israel. Minorities live under Israel. Puerto Ricans live under America. It happens. There's such a thing as minorities. I say...
This is such a mask off moment. I don't even have anything to say. This dude just went full-blown supremacist. Full-blown supremacist. He said, you know what? Yeah, everyone has minorities that they oppress. Why are you pointing me out? That is, first of all, that's never a good fucking argument. Like, that should never be your argument. That should never be your argument, okay? If you have to make that argument, you lost. Also, he's creating this narrative that the land of Palestine didn't exist and Palestinian people don't exist. And I think that's one of the worst propaganda points that these people use, because it's like, we know Palestinian people exist. We have proof that they exist. We literally have historical proof that they've existed and they lived on that land before you occupied it. So I don't know what the argument is here where it's like, oh, they just came out of nowhere. You know what I mean? That's not factually true.
Control that area, give people a chance for life. That doesn't mean occupation. And the word occupation itself, speaking of lies, I've been called on this program, by the way, Pierce, I've been called every name. Fascist, liar, apartheidist, every word, except there's one word that's missing from the lexicon of my interlocutors on this program, which is jihad. They make it look like Hamas is some kind of like human rights organization fighting for liberation and equality and a two-state solution, read the jihad charter, the Hamas charter, that is full of the ideas that the Jewish people should be destroyed, that Israel is some kind of crusader continuation of the Crusaders and needs to be wiped away, just like they took out the Crusaders in the Middle Ages. And they have all this language that's clear what their real intention is. So the people that are with me on the program, they are basically the sheep. They are wolf in sheep's clothing.
He really tried to resonate there with the viewer. Literally forgot the saying.
Dress up like liberals. They talk the stuff that Western folks, you know, can understand, apartheid and all that stuff. But in their heart, they have jihad. They want to destroy Israel. Ask them when the occupation began. They'll tell you 1948, or they'll tell you 1917. They want to see the end of Israel as a Jewish state altogether. That's what this is about. So they dress up in these clothes. They come on to the show. They talk about Israel being an occupier, i.e. Israel's not an ancient country, not an ancient people. They don't belong in this region. They need to be evicted altogether. That's what they want. They want to erase Israel and replace it with the Palestine, which they created in the 60s. That's what this thing is about. And they put on the airs of liberalism for ears like yours.
Sorry.
Okay, let me just go to Emily, because there is some breaking news. Sky News Arabia is reporting a huge explosion in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. Now, if that is a retaliatory strike by Israel against the, as they see it, Hezbollah rocket attack that killed 12 Druze and Israeli children, what is your reaction to that? And how concerned should we all be that if this is an Israeli strike at the heart of Beirut, that this is now a dramatic escalation in what is going on in the Middle East?
Well, if it is Israel, that definitely is a major escalation, and we'll have to follow that closely and see what happened. But I do have to say that the fact that Beirut is even involved in the first place is a part of the problem. Nobody's speaking about Lebanon's involvement and Lebanon's role. Lebanon's a sovereign country. You know, it doesn't have the same excuses that some of these Palestinian factions have. And Lebanon does bear responsibility for that. And unfortunately, it's being occupied, for lack of a better term, by the Islamic Republic of Iran. But that doesn't change the fact that that country does bear responsibility. Not only that, the United Nations bears responsibility. It was the UN that's supposed to keep Hezbollah in line, according to UN Resolution 1701, and has failed to for many, many years as Hezbollah.
So Lebanon is broken up into two parts. Half of Lebanon is Hezbollah. The other half is the Lebanese government. One half is Christian, one half is Muslim. Hezbollah areas are Muslim. Lebanese faction areas are mostly Christian. They're also the Middle Eastern country with the most amount of Christian people. They have about 50% Christians, which is a lot higher than your average Middle Eastern country. Now, with that being said, Lebanon's been struggling a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, their government, they had this whole pyramid scheme with money. The government was taken up, and then, you know, Hezbollah and the government also don't work that great together. Also, the border of Lebanon has been getting bombed relentlessly. So, yes, Lebanon is dealing with its own problems. But what we're not about to do is justify bombing their capital, which has a bunch of innocent civilians, which, by the way, this attack, it ended up killing 3 people, 2 of which were children, 1 was a woman, but it wounded 74 fucking people because they wanted to target one Hezbollah commander, and they did end up killing him, by the way. But this was a very clear escalation. First of all, Beirut is in the middle of Lebanon. Bombing the border of Lebanon and then bombing the middle of Lebanon, 2 completely different things, okay? Neither of which is good. But Beirut is a clear escalation. But second of all, you're not about to justify this by saying, oh, well, they're going through their own problems. So that's not how this goes, babes. You know what I mean? A government can go through all their problems. That doesn't mean you have any kind of fucking audacity to bomb the shit out of their capital.
Has used that southern border to build up what they've built up along with the Islamic Republic. Now, I also want to just correct one small thing, and that is that if that is Israel, it's not in retaliation for a strike that killed the 12 children. It would be in response to the over 6,000 projectiles that have been fired at Israeli civilian areas on that northern border. Now, remember, a lot of these people, tens of thousands of Israelis, have been evacuated from their homes for 10 months and counting. This is not a sustainable...
Yeah, that's because you keep bombing them. If you stop bombing them, they'll stop bombing you back. Also, you have the fucking Iron Dome. Bro, they can't believe their own lies. Like, they can't. There's no way. How much are they getting paid? Because I'm not willing to accept that this girl is that fucking stupid or dense. I can't.
Reality. Israel does have an obligation legally under international law to respond, to push back Hezbollah, and that's what needs to happen. And the best thing to save lives on both sides is that international actors intervene and pressure both sides, especially Hezbollah, to retreat and to stop firing at Israel. Israel didn't start this war with Hezbollah. We don't want one with them. We don't want one with the Islamic Republic. But we do have to protect our citizens. And I also want to add one more thing I wanted to say earlier to Omar, and that is that he mentioned how there's no justice, no peace when all these things have happened, a lot of propaganda buzzwords about what happened with Palestinians, in addition to what Mustafa told us as well. If you're talking about no justice, no peace, that's the exact same logic that someone, not me because I condemned it, but that someone could use to justify the egregious acts alleged at this point, but egregious acts committed against Palestinian prisoners. The fact that they are still holding hostage 100 people. This is outrageous.
Hey, Emily, I want to get
there's been sexual violence against them too.
Okay. Emily, I'm going to interrupt because we're running out of time.
I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry. I'm trying to she said if no justice, no peace is a thing, then that exists for the Israeli soldiers that allegedly raped a man too. Oh, wow. Okay. So then she's saying that the far-right settlers have a right to protest and get him freed because technically no justice, no peace. I'm not even going to touch that. I'm not even going to fucking touch that.
I want to go to Omar for the final word. Omar, your reaction to this explosion, which is being widely reported now in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. It is being seen as potentially Israel responding to what they say was the Hezbollah rocket attack, which killed 12 children at the weekend. What is your reaction to this?
If this is indeed an Israeli strike on Beirut, I think it's an extremely dangerous escalation, and we could be heading towards a configuration that has unknown bounds. Hezbollah is not Hamas. It is infinitely more powerful. It has the capacity for deterrence. It has the capacity to respond in a way that, frankly, I don't think Israel can quite handle. But the issue is that there has been literally hundreds of Lebanese who have been killed by Israeli bombings over the past several months, including plenty of civilians, including Lebanese children. So you have this dynamic of a back and forth across the border. And once again, it ultimately comes down to the fact that Israel is refusing to end the genocide in Gaza. That is the cause of the fact that we have a tension and this back and forth on the northern border. And rather than come together and say, okay, how do we calm the situation down? Israel is insistent on a dynamic in which it can dominate and kill and obliterate and steal land at will. They can occupy the Golan Heights, they can occupy the West Bank, they can besiege Gaza, they can slaughter tens of thousands of children in Gaza. But if somebody fires something across from Lebanon, then that's justification for Israel to expand the war. It is utter and complete lunacy. We have every single time that we've lived in a world in which crimes like this have happened in the past, people have sat around and said, how could people back then let that happen? Why didn't anybody intervene? And right now we have a dynamic in which a rogue apartheid state that is engaging in genocide is escalating us towards regional catastrophe. And rather than the world stepping up to actually hold this country accountable and demand de-escalation and demand equal rights for everyone and a way to solve the problem, it's nothing but throwing more arms and more money at this genocidal state that is actually pushing us all towards the cliff.
Okay.
It is incredibly dangerous, and it requires intervention in a very different direction than the one we've seen.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see exactly what's
Omar
happening.
I'm
sorry.
Hamas and Hezbollah.
I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry, Rabbi Fleischer. We have run out of time. I have to go, unfortunately, but I do appreciate all of you for that debate. It was fascinating to listen to it, and hopefully this is not a massive escalation, but it could be, and if it is...
It was a massive escalation. All right, what I thought about that debate. Okay, so it was very insufferable to watch as someone that has been obviously covering this news and following it since October and prior to October as well. But I think one thing that this debate did really well was highlight how absolutely diabolical Zionist ideology and people on that side can be, and how their rhetoric is complete propaganda and it just does not make sense when you put it under a microscope. I think this debate did a great job at that. I think that it really just magnified how absolutely deranged they are in their very fascist and right-leaning beliefs. I think that the two Palestinian people who were there were very concise. They made all of their points very clearly. And I honestly, I actually, it was very insufferable to watch, but I actually really liked it because I think it really demonstrated how nuts people on the other side are. Like, it just did such a great job at highlighting it. And I don't think even they knew that they did that themselves, but every single thing they said was so absolutely, number one, diabolical, and number two, it was refuted. And so we love to see that. And also, I do think Piers is shifting a little bit, albeit it took him 9 fucking months, but I do think he's shifting a bit and he's not really standing for that propaganda anymore. And I think it's good. We need more of it. All right, thank you so much for watching my YouTube channel. My name is Ariana Jasmine. I do reacts like this all the time and I post it on YouTube, so make sure you subscribe to me, like, comment, share, do what you gotta do to boost this video, and I'll see you guys next time.